Welcome back to the UnHolier Podcast. I'm your host, Jenny Smith, and today I am joined with my friend, David Keck, who is going to be co-host with me today on this episode, along with our guest, Martha. Martha is an author, she's a special speaker, and she is an advocate for cult survivors. I really hope you guys enjoy this episode, so let's get started. Welcome, Martha.
Thank you so much for having me. And this is the first, the second podcast that I've done that from other people that have been in a cult. So this is huge. This feels like home because this is a shared experience, but it doesn't define us. And we are much more than cult survivors. So thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Thank you so much for being on here with us. And today I want to mention too, we have our lovely friend and producer, David Keck, with us today. And I'm so excited to have him here with us as well.
I know, I'm so excited. I was telling Martha that I've heard so much about her and I can't wait to have this conversation. So thank you for letting me set in on this. And you had mentioned, Martha, that you've done one podcast one or two, or this is the second one that is cult related.
Yeah.
I was not in a religious cult. I did not know how many people were. It was almost foreign to me until I got into this network. And I'm just so oh my gosh. So I cannot wait to hear your story.
Yeah. I think that's one thing that I talk about often is people don't understand how enormous the amount of cults are just in the United States alone. It's guesstimated that there's over 3,000 cults just in the United States alone and 5,000 globally. So if you even have 10 members, that's a lot of people. And my cult by itself was 200 to 300 people at any given time. So that's just a lot of survivors.
Yes, that is a lot of survivors. Well, I'm anxious to get into your story. So if you wouldn't mind just giving us a brief summary overview and then we'll dive into the details from there.
Yeah, sure. So I was born and raised in southern Minnesota in a little farm town called Grand Meadow. And I was born and raised in a religious cult. The cult compound was in Shawano, Wisconsin. And so we were part of a cult that we all didn't live on the same compound. We all had our own homes and we commuted to the compound every weekend. So all the families lived in Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan. We would all meet at the compound Friday late evening, and we would be there through the weekend and then head back, usually early Monday morning, late Sunday night, early Monday morning back to our homes to be at our homes during the week. So my experience was very controlled, right? And as cults go, I didn't have my own personality. I didn't have my own identity because everything that I said was all cult, right? And so I grew up traumatized from a very young age, around age 7. And when I say traumatized, I mean physically, emotionally, spiritually, sexually, all of it. It started around age 7 when he chose me. And what does it mean when he chose me is he took an interest in me and started the grooming process. I didn't move into the cult until I was 18, legal. And I moved into the cult compound when I was 18, which means I was taken from my family and moved into the compound to live with him. So growing up in this very rigid, isolated, restricted environment breeds a lot of no confidence, no self-awareness, no self-esteem, no self-identity. And so when I escaped at age 26, I didn't know how to function in the real world. And the real world was really overwhelming. And the real world was really unsafe because that was what I was programmed to believe. And so now I was creating that in my reality is everybody's unsafe. Everybody's untrustworthy. Everybody's going to hurt me. Everybody's going right. And so the first 5 or 7 years of my life, I just imploded because I didn't know how to function in the real world. And so I really had a hard time integrating. The only thing I did know how to do was work because you're taught a work ethic in a cult, right? You have a manual labor work ethic that's second to none, right? You know how to work. And so I knew how to work. So I knew how to put that fake mask on and just go to work, fake positivity, let's go, and I knew how to work. And so I was thriving professionally while the rest of me was completely falling apart. And so that eventually imploded, and my marriage was a wreck, and my life was just falling apart, except for the professional. And that's when I was introduced to the idea of the trauma being stored on a cellular level in our bodies, and understanding that what I was really, why my body was falling apart, why I was emotionally unstable, why I was psychologically all over the place and breaking down, was because I hadn't addressed this big, dark bag of gunk that I'd been pulling along with me since childhood, of all of my traumas that were stored on a cellular level now in my body. And so that was what started my work on my healing journey of reclaiming who I was and figuring out who I was, because I was then in my 30s and I had no clue who I was. And that's been a painful uncovering, but also an amazing testimony, right? So the last 14 years has been dedicated to that healing journey that has brought me here now.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned healing journey. I know before we started recording today, we talked about the fact that it is a journey. It's never a final destination. You're not like one day I'm healed completely. I mean, you can have moments where you're triggered by something that you're like, oh, wait, I got to work on that still. I still have some things that need to be worked out. And that's totally normal. I mean, that is something we all struggle with. And so I'm very interested to know, if you don't mind me asking, what was the name of the cult? Did it have a name? Was it a certain like religious affiliation?
So it started out as the Fellowship of the Lord Jesus Christ, and the brethren were the followers, right? But by the time I was born, so my parents joined in 1975, I was born in 1979. And growing up, I never heard our name. I only know the name of the cult from the beginning from my parents. Like by the time I was born, they no longer had practiced under that name. They had already gone underground, and there was never a name other than the name of Cult Man, who I call Cult Man now, or his organization, which was called SIST. It started out as Christian based, evangelical Christian based, where Jesus had appeared to him in a vision and had said he was supposed to lead his people and all of the things, as a lot of these cults start, right? You have the vision, it's Jesus, you're chosen, let's
Right.
And then by the time I came along, and by the time I was old enough to remember, he was already infiltrating that group with things from his past, like Hinduism. Then he started practicing parts of Judaism. So it was kind of a hodgepodge of whatever he felt. Some of our dietary restrictions fell along like the Judaism, right? Some of the ways that we were taught to pray were more Hindu, like it was just all a hodgepodge of his egomania and his narcissistic behaviors of how to control us, right? We were only introduced to the Old Testament because what we were taught to fear. And you can control people that are feared. Or in fear. You can't control people that understand love, mercy, grace, all of those things. So you don't need the New Testament. So you had to get rid of the New Testament, right? And so it was just this very slow, manipulative experience of how it turned into what it did. Because as you know, cults don't start out as cults. They generally start out as something positive, and then, money, sex, ego, all those things get involved and change it into something that is evil, is bad, is harmful, is isolating, all of those things.
Do you mind if I ask, you had mentioned that the grooming process started at 7 years old. Is that by design? And you had mentioned he, which I'm glad that you don't use names. I always try to stay away from that as well. But when you say he, are you referring to like the leader of the cult? And were you the only one, or was this like...
No. Yes. So yes, the cult leader is a man, and he groomed many. It would be after I got out of the cult, and it was probably 5 or 7 years after I got out of the cult, that I realized that others had been sexually abused. Because it wasn't well known. Like, people didn't talk about it. People didn't know, nobody knew about it. Right. And we didn't understand that part of it. Right. And I always thought that was why we weren't a cult, because we didn't fall under that predatory sexual behaviors. And so when I found out that we did, I was like, oh, because I was abused by him, but I wasn't sexually abused by him. I was sexually abused by people within the cult. So he was grooming me, but he couldn't break me. And so he couldn't move to that next step with me because he needed to break me first. And I didn't know how to be broken. Well, that was God. That was God saying, no, we're not letting that door be opened. Right. And so he was never able to get me to that next step. But finding out years later that there had been so much rampant sexual deviance and abuse, and it's sickening. And yeah.
I'm very interested to hear about the compound. I've heard of compounds where that was their permanent home, right? And they would garden and grow food and cattle and all that. So what was the weekends like when you met there? And what was the housing like?
So the compound was on about 200 acres in the middle of rural Wisconsin. And the compound itself was huge, massive. But when you think huge, massive, think of empty, huge, massive, right? Like there's no beds and toilets and lights. And it's just there's just big open rooms. So the sleeping was basically everybody in a sleeping bag packed in like sardines in their family units. Like and it was concrete floors. The meeting room had plywood floors that we all sat on our knees for. So there was no pews, no chairs. And we would sit on that plywood floor for 10 to 12 hours a day on meeting days, right? So what does the weekend look like? It's either prayer and worship, or it's manual labor, or it's punishment. Those are the three things that you were doing. And so the manual labor was the upkeep of the compound. It was the upkeep of the grounds. 200 acres is a lot of grounds. And we had apple orchards, we had animals, we had sheep, we had turkeys, we had ducks, so there was tons of always work to be done, right? All the grasses had to be cut. The gardens had to be planted and taken care of and watered and all of those things, right? So there was always manual labor to be done. And from a very, very young age, you were out doing manual labor, whether that's pulling weeds or that is, holding lights for the other groups that are working on something in trenches or on the compound on the outside, whatever. You're taught this like work ethic very, very, very young. And so that's kind of what it looked like.
Wow. That that does not sound desirable in the least.
But when you don't know that there's not people that go to a place every weekend and do what we did, we didn't know. We thought this was normal, right? This was normal. And these people that I grew up with and that slept in the same rooms as I did and showered in the same showers as I did, you don't understand what it is to be in something like that and yet not know anybody, because you're not allowed friendships. You're not allowed to talk. You're not allowed. He keeps himself strategically in the middle of everybody. So even though you're sleeping right next to another family, your pod would never talk to that pod, because if you got caught, there was punishment, right? So it was so isolating. So even though I grew up with these people and worked with them, slept with them, ate with them, we didn't know each other like on a personal level, right? Like the only time that we heard anything about each other was when it was in the middle of a meeting and he was talking bad about us or what we had done wrong or why we were going to hell or what kind of whorish behaviors we'd been up to, right? Like there was no like celebration of like, oh, Martha just finished middle school, or right. Like there was no celebratory positive things that was shared about us. It was only the negatives. And so when there were times that we would be working on a project with other kids and say Cult Man wasn't present, or his caretakers or underguards or any of the things that were watching us weren't present, we would dare to talk and we would have conversations. And so there was a little bit of that, but I still didn't feel like I knew any of them. I've gotten to know a handful of them since leaving the cult 20 years ago, way more than I ever did while I was in there, right? Mm-hmm. Which is just a weird mind warp.
So was no one allowed to communicate, or was it just the children couldn't and the women couldn't and the men could? Like how? I can't remember.
at all. Like you were taught that you do not, because, and the reason now I understand why it was, right? Because if you get too many collectives talking, you're going to start questioning what in the F is going on here. Why are we doing these crazy asinine things, especially for the adults, because they knew a different life. Like my parents were hippies. They knew a different life before the cult. I didn't, right? So he had to make sure that the adults didn't talk, because they would start questioning. When you get two or more brilliant or smart people together, they're going to start going, do you think this is as crazy as I do? Right. And so he had to keep that from happening. But then that perpetrates down to your children, where it's unsafe to talk. Your children know that it's unsafe to talk. It's programming from birth. It's programming.
Yeah. So what kind of punishment would be ensued upon you guys if you did talk or you did something that he would consider out of line?
So everything from the use of cattle prods, like using them to hurt us, or being put in a big pickle barrel, or being whipped with 2x4s, metal, electrical wires, switches, paddles, basically anything he could get his hands on was used as a weapon against us. There was sticking your nose to the metal poles in the middle of the meeting room, and you couldn't go to the bathroom. You couldn't eat for 24, 48 hours. Yeah.
So was everybody there to witness the punishment?
Yeah.
You were made like as an example to everybody else. Like, this is what's going to happen to everybody else if you do what this person did.
Yep.
And the parents never were like, that's my kid. Don't touch my kid. Don't mess with my kid. Oh my gosh. Wow.
Because you have to remember, when you believe at your core that you have to make this sacrifice for your own place in heaven, right? Like, this is the earthly pain that we have to go through in order to be guaranteed heaven, or to be guaranteed that our souls are going to be saved. You start to just be like, oh, this is just part of the sacrifice process, right? You don't question it. And when our parents literally thought our kids are in the capable hands of cult man, and that's the best place they could possibly be. So if they're being punished, it's because they've done something wrong and deserve it.
I hope I asked this correctly, and please forgive my ignorance, but all these families left Monday through Thursday, Monday through Friday. I guess after work and school on Fridays is when you all went in.
Yeah.
Did people just stop going, or was it like people just kept remaining, like coming back
to the compound?
Uh-huh.
So my family was part of it for 30 years. So me and 6 of my siblings were born into it. I have 9 brothers and sisters, and we were part of it for 30 years. I still have a sister there, and she's now been there over 50 years, because she went in at 4, and she's now going to turn 55 54 next week. Or next month. So yeah, we are on the 4th generation of people that have been part of this cult. And my parents left 6 months after I escaped, when I finally confronted my dad and told my dad of all the things that had happened to me in the 8 years that I lived in the compound. And that was the switch for him, because he was like, no, this is not what we signed up for. This is not what we thought was happening to you. We thought this was the biggest blessing that you could have had in your life, was to be asked to move in there. Right. And that was their triggering. That was their moment of like, no, that we're done. And so then my parents left 6 months after I did. And then now we just have the one sister there. But yeah, so as people were exposed to other things, you could just be like, deuces, I'm out. Like, I'm out. Unless you lived in the compound, then you're guarded by guards, and your every move is monitored, and like, that's just different. But there's some cults that, because everybody lives on the compound, everything is monitored. Ours wasn't one of them. We were only monitored if we lived in the compound or on the compound. But even living where we lived, he was still so infiltrated in all of our lives. He always knew what we were doing, because nobody did anything without his permission. We didn't go to school. We didn't go to college. We didn't buy a car. We didn't buy a house. Everything was run by him.
Well,
his full-time job was just keeping all of us in line.
yeah, and well, I'm glad you brought that up because I had written down my question is Monday through Friday, what was your life like? Because you said no school. So how did you get educated? Was it homeschooling, I guess?
So most of the families that were part of the cult were homeschooled. I was homeschooled for several years because I was labeled by the public school mentally retarded in third grade because I couldn't read and I couldn't write and I couldn't do math. And so I was labeled mentally retarded. To find out later, I was properly diagnosed as dyslexic with ADD and ADHD tendencies, which just means that I just learned differently. And so my mom homeschooled me until I could get back up to level and go back to public school. My family all went to public school. So for whatever reason, my family was allowed to go to public school, but most of the other families did not. They were mostly homeschooled until college age. So, but my experience, my family's experiences, we were in public school, which was hard because the main reason why so many of them were homeschooled, I think, is because they lived in small communities where if you have too many of us in those small communities, people talk because they're like, oh, there's something going on. I always lived in places that there was no other people from my group in our area. It was just us. So we were kind of just like, oh, they're weird. Those are the weird people, that girls that wear skirts all the time, can't cut their hair, don't wear makeup, don't wear jewelry, and eat funny, right? Like that was, but there wasn't any other of the group around me or around my family. We went to public school and we were just oddballs, right? And that's okay. There's a lot of oddballs out there. But I think the people that lived closer to other families didn't go because it would bring too much attention to the group.
Interesting. I cannot believe that place is still open. Is the cult man still the leader of it? He is. Okay. It just makes me so sad for your sister that she's still involved in that. But let's go back to when you started living on the compound. So was it something, because I know like when you're involved in a cult and you become, it's like your life, it becomes part of you at that point. You're brainwashed, you're in it. When you were chosen at 18, were you excited? Like, did you feel like privileged? Like, oh my gosh, I'm special, I'm going. At the time, did you feel that way?
Yes.
Yeah. And then when you got there, at what point were you like, oh crap, this is not what I want to be involved in? Like, was there something that happened, or was it a series of events that happened that made you come to that realization?
I never came to that realization.
You didn't. How did you get out?
I was there 8 years and extreme trauma. Like I was starved for 5 months. I told you he tried to break me and I would not submit. And that made him so angry. And so he beat me, broke bones, starved me, burnt all of my things, shaved my head 15 times. Like the things that I went through in that 8 years, like just the inhumaneness of the things that I experienced, but he couldn't break me. My spirit just could not be broken. And I wouldn't submit. I didn't understand what I was submitting to, but I never came to that point of like, this isn't right. I never had that moment. The moment that I had was I was working for one of the cult-owned businesses for the last 4 years of me being in the compound. And I would be out in the public from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. every day at this store that I was running for the compound or for the cult. And we got internet in that store. I found my sister, one of my birth sisters, on the internet, and I started reaching out to her. And my moment was the moment that she told me she was pregnant with her first child, my first niece or nephew. And that was the switch for me. And that because my parents were still part of the cult. My sister was alone. She didn't have anybody. And I'm her older sister. And her and I had always been very close growing up. We're only 17 months apart. And something switched inside of me that said, I cannot let this baby be born without having me, her auntie. because I had grown up with no extended family, because we weren't allowed to have extended family relationships, because if they weren't part of the cult, you couldn't dissociate with them. So I had no grandparents, I had no aunts and uncles, I had no cousins, I had no relationships outside of the cult. And so something switched in me when she said she was pregnant, and I was like, I'm not continuing that for this child. And that I was able to get the courage to escape because of that child, not because of anything that I had realized or had an epiphany of. It took me years. As you know, you have to go through a deprogramming to realize just how much you went through, because I had blacked out and I had compartmentalized so much trauma just to survive and just to keep breathing.
Yeah.
That you don't know what's happened because you're just trying to stay alive. And so when that switch went off for me, though, then it was like balls to the walls. I am getting out of here, and I'm going to get out safely this time, because I had tried to run away before and had gotten caught and gotten brought back. And that brought a whole level of extended abuse. That's when my head was shaved. All my things were burnt. And there was just an extended amount of abuse because of that last time. So I knew I could not go back. I knew that I could not get caught. That wasn't an option this time, because I had to get home to my sister, and I had to be there before this baby was born. And that was what my switch was. And then it would be many years before I realized, what I had really experienced.
Martha, when you were going through this torture, when you were living on the compound, were you kept away from your family? Could your family still come to the compound, but you were not allowed to have contact with them? So they were not seeing, they were just believing what they're being told, that you're getting closer to heaven and you're privileged, right?
Correct. Well, they would hear about all of my missteps, right? Every time that I got in trouble, it was talked about in the meeting. So my parents just kept hearing about how awful of a teenager I was, right? And how I couldn't, they heard all of that stuff. They didn't see the abuse. They didn't see the beatings. They didn't see him starving me. They didn't see the background stuff that was happening during the week when they weren't there. But they were
communication at all? Were you able to talk on the phone, or were they knew you were at least alive? They just had to take his word for everything.
Yes.
Wow. What about when you worked for the company that was owned by one of the members? Was it open to the public? Did you have so when people saw you and they could see that obviously you're not healthy and not in a good place, did someone not get involved somehow, like police called?
So it's funny that you asked that. So I managed the first business that the cult owned. So the cult as the organization, SIST, bought this building, which was a functioning shop, and I was told to manage it, or that was going to be my job. So when I started managing it, the abuse stopped. I no longer got beaten. I no longer because I needed to be the face of this organization. And because we were open to the public, he could, right? He's not dumb, right? And so the abuse just became different, 12 to 20 hour days, 365 days a year without earning one penny. So the abuse was just different. It was no longer the physical abuse or the starvation or those types of things. Now I'm working 12 to 20 hour days, 365 days a year with not a day off and not getting paid a single penny. The abuse was just different.
Maybe just enough food and water, because that was a form of punishment for you, right? So was it just enough food and water to be able to have enough strength to get through those 20-hour shifts?
So he didn't even feed me. One of the members that I would shower at their house and stuff, she fed me, and she fed me well. She did feed me. I ate breakfast before I left, and I ate dinner when I got home, depending on whatever time that was. But yeah, she mostly fed me. He would feed me maybe on the weekends, but he needed me to have a good appearance. So he let me grow my hair out So my head was being shaved all the way to the point of maybe, I would say about 3 to 6 months before I opened that shop. And so my hair was finally starting to grow out. And so my head was never shaved again, because now I was the public appearance of the organization, of this business. And so he had to protect that image.
Wow. Oh, it's interesting because you said you did try to escape a few times. Did you have something that triggered that? Like, was there, you're just trying to get away from the abuse, or what was it that triggered the need to feel like you needed to escape those few times that you did try?
So I only tried once and I failed. And the second time I was successful is when I actually escaped. But the first time was I just felt like everything was being restricted, and the abuse was, right? Like, you can only take so much. And I was just breaking as a human. And there was this boy within the group that had been on the outside for a couple of years, and he was still kind of part of the group, but not really. And his dad and I worked very closely together on manual projects around the compound. And so his dad and I just started talking, and he was talking about his son wanted to get married and his son wanted to settle down, but he didn't want to come back to the cult to do it. Right. Anyway, it just became this almost like fantasy of like, well, I could be that wife. At least I wouldn't have to be here. If I got married, I would be able to leave. I would be right. And so he did, eventually this boy did ask Cult Man if he could marry me. And Cult Man was like, absolutely not. You wouldn't want her, this, that, and the other. Right. And so he and I had already started this like flirtation thing. And so I was like, well, if he won't let us get married, we'll leave. We'll find a way to leave. Right. And so that was why I left that first time.
Wow. Okay. So how did you get caught? Did you get past the compound, or did they find you somewhere else and bring you back?
I made it to Colorado and they brought me back.
How did they find you?
So when you leave, like, the henchmen go out, they're looking for you. So they went to my siblings' houses that were no longer part of the cult. They have my family on the phone. They have people looking everywhere. Right. And they knew I was with this boy because his family knew I was with this boy. Anyway, it was to make a very long story short, I ended up telling on myself because this boy ended up raping me.
Oh my gosh.
And so I now felt unsafe, and I absolutely didn't want to marry him. And I thought the rape was God's punishment for me leaving. And so I told on myself. So he was unloading the truck at this hotel in Colorado, and I locked him out of the room, and I called Cult Man collect, because I was so brainwashed to believe that the things that had happened to me were my fault because I had left Cult Man, and because I had, sinned against Cult Man and thus sinned against God, and that this was the repercussions for my actions.
So after you got back to the compound, then I'm assuming you were severely punished by Cult Man.
Yeah.
In addition to what you just went through.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
That's when he burnt all my things, and I was excommunicated from being able to sit in the same meeting room as all of the other brethren's daughters or the brethren as a whole. I wasn't allowed to be in the same room with them. The kids spit on me. The kids put duck poop in my shoes. And then the head shaving started. I paid a hefty price for being gone 4 days.
And when you finally escaped the second time, did you just walk out? Did you say, I'm done with this place, I'm leaving, my sister's
having a baby? That's not an option. No. Yeah. No, that's not an option. So this time I knew that I couldn't get caught. Like, I had to make sure that it was calculated. and it was much more planned out. It involved somebody from the outside. My sister set up a safe house. I had a car was given to me from somebody on the outside, an escape car. Like, it was very, very, very well planned. And the part of the plan that made it the safest is that God sent a divinely ordained Wisconsin blizzard. And so all of the guards' windshields were covered with snow, and it was piling up really, really quickly. And their windshield wipers couldn't keep up. So everyone just shut them down and just let the snow pile. So I literally was able to walk out of the compound and walk in by the guards, by the chains, undo the chains, put the chains back, leave, take the car that I had, go switch it out with the escape car. Like, it all happened only because I didn't have, the plan was to wait till they fell asleep. And you know that there's about an hour when everybody's asleep at the same time, and you could slip out then, right? Well, what if one of them wakes up when the chain opens? But God had that covered by this winter blizzard. And so nobody woke up. I was able to leave, switch cars before anybody noticed that I was gone. And I was already gone to the safe house by the time that they realized and the henchmen went out. But I stayed in hiding for 3 months because the henchmen were on me. They were at my family's houses. They were all looking for me for a long time. And so I hid. And when I finally came up for air, and when it had died down, at some point he gave up because, I had been gone long enough. And then it really helped me when my parents left, because my dad basically said, Martha's told us everything. If you come after her, we will call the law. Like, we're done. Leave us alone. We're walking away. And that helped for my own safety and security.
This
Wow.
is going to be backtracking a little bit, but I have a couple of questions. First, I want to say thank you for sharing all of this with us, but especially about what happened with that boy. I am a survivor of sexual assault, so I know the vulnerability with that. So thank you for sharing that. I will say I'm a little pissed because I was like, this is the beginning of the most beautiful love story. And, and there is zero justification for sexual assault. So please don't take this question that way. But do you think that happened because that's how he was groomed and trained by some of the members of the church, and he was also a victim of that, which does not justify what he did? But do you think that's how that started?
100%. And he, on the way back, he apologized and apologized and apologized. And he did tell me that basically, when somebody says you can't have candy, can't have candy, can't have candy, and then you finally get a piece of candy and it's like all the candy, right? Like, you don't have any measure of this is not bad, right? That's a very weird analogy, but you understand what I'm saying. So he said that he let his lust get the best of him, right? Because now, when you're not allowed and you're told it's horrible and you're told it's bad and you never and that's the way you're groomed and that's the way you're programmed, you don't know what it is, right? And so then you're just like, oh, well, right? I unfortunately had been raped and molested several times before that happened. That was the only time in my adulthood, because I was then 20. The other things that happened in my early, when I was 8, I was molested by a 24-year-old for 2 years. And then when I was 14, so I had already had these experiences. This was different because I now knew what sex was. And this was just on a different level. And this was somebody that I thought I was going to spend my life with. And was it as vicious as somebody? No, but it was still unconsensual.
Yeah.
And it was still painful. And it was still something I didn't want. And therefore, it was still wrong.
Well, and that's what I was going to ask. And please, you were always more than welcome to not answer a question. But I would assume that there's feelings for him, or at least there was, right? And I mean, you're going to marry this guy. At some point, you would have wanted to have sex with him. So right. Did he proposition you and you're like, you know what, I'm just not ready yet? And then that's when it became forceful and he was like, no, I'm going after it.
There wasn't even a communication. It was just, yeah. So to be fair, on the second night we had, or the second morning, he had asked me to marry him. He had put a ring on my finger from Walmart. It was official, right? Like we were engaged. And then that was the night that all this happened. And so in his head, I was already property. In his head, I was right. And how do I say this? I was in love with the idea of being in love with him. Mm-hmm. I was more in love with the idea of being free. I didn't have feelings for him in that way yet, but I was willing to give it a try if it meant I could be free. If it meant that I was out of the compound. Do you see what I'm? Mm-hmm. So I was more in love with the idea of being in love and starting a new life and not being in the compound than I was in love with him. So mm-hmm. No, I wasn't ready to share that with him because I didn't like him yet in that way, right? I was in love with the idea of being free.
He was the escape plan.
And he was the escape plan. And that's what I literally put in my book is like, he was my escape plan. Like he was not my husband at that time, right? Mm-hmm. Could that have become that? I don't know. We'll never know.
My skin crawled because I mean, of course I've thought about this before, but to hear you say it, of him putting the ring on your finger meant you were property, which is what your whole life has been, is you were property to this cult. And so did you think that there was any, did you find any comfortability with being claimed as property because that's all you had known? Or were you broken away enough at that point where that was also a red flag turnoff kind of thing?
I would like to say that I even understood any of that then. I did not. Mm-hmm. It would be many years before I realized what had transpired.
Do you know whatever happened to him?
Yeah, he died in a plane crash. And he and we had the trip back when he was bringing me back to the compound, and Cult Man said I could not talk to him because he would try to change my mind and he would try to take me away again. And so he talked at me, I listened, but I couldn't respond to him for 20 some hours of this drive back from Colorado to Wisconsin. And in that time, I would say I got to know him. And I understand now he was a product of our environment. I don't hate him. I have forgiven him 100 times over. I'm sad that his life was taken in the plane crash. His family has been devastated by tragedy after tragedy from the cult. His brother committed suicide. So I have no hard feelings any longer towards him or to the things that he did, because we were just product of our environment and we were products of the things that happened to us. And so I am able to forgive that, right? Because
yeah, no, you're good. You're fine.
Yeah, you're okay. Take a breath.
Take your time.
I've never gotten this deep in this.
It's okay.
So thank you for allowing me to. I think it's important for people to know the truth. I'm willing to share, but as you can tell, there's still things that
are
still raw.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So Martha, we really appreciate you being so vulnerable with us and telling us your story in the cult, but we do like to hear the positive side of things and tell people that there is life after the cult and there is good that can come out of bad. So tell us, after you left the cult and you were with your sister and she, I'm assuming, had her baby and you started this new life, what did life look like after the cult? And tell us where you're at now with everything.
Yeah. So I've now been out of the cult over 20 years. 20 years was December 27th of last year. And so it's been a long, arduous journey to healing. My niece was born. Her name's Malia, and I call her my reason because she is the reason that I found the courage, the strength, and the fortuitiveness to be able to make my escape and to start a new life. And like I talked about at the beginning, my life fell apart long before I was able to step into my own healing journey. You know, I got married about 18 months after getting out of the cult to somebody from the outside. And he was an absolute gem of a human. And he was the first man to ever treat me with love, respect, honor, unconditional love. But I didn't know how to be loved. I had never been loved. I had never been cherished. I had never been taken care of. And I was stuck in fight or flight. My nervous system did not know how to be loved. And so I imploded that. My physical body, you know, started to break down. I started having debilitating migraines. I had, because of PTSD, complex PTSD, I had fibromyalgia. I had cervical issues and lumbar issues because of my broken bones and things that never were attended to and didn't heal properly. I had chronic back pain, chronic neck pain, gastrointestinal issues, hormone issues. Like, the list was just like so long of all of the diagnoses. And when I was being bounced around the healthcare system and just given another diagnosis, told to take another pill, and eventually I'm just like, I can't live like this. And I started praying that God would just take me, because I'm like, who wants to live like this? I didn't want to take my own life, but I didn't want to live. If this was living, like, who wants to do this, right? And eventually, when I had that aha moment of trauma being stored on a cellular level, and I was like, oh, there's hope. That is me. That's bells, whistles. That's Martha. Guys, that's Martha. There must be people that understand this. And that's when I became my own advocate. That's when I started doing my own research. That's when I started going to naturopathic doctors in order to help me go back to the little girl, to save her, to heal her, to do the work that I had to in order to reclaim her, to start calibrating my nervous system again, getting out of fight or flight, releasing all this excess weight that I had been carrying around as a protection, right? Just being able to reclaim me, who was Martha Glory outside of the cult. And so that's been this last 14 years of my healing journey of really intentional, very difficult work, but of reclaiming me, and then being able to see myself for who I am, who I want to be, who God says I am, not the God of the cult, but the God that I have a personal relationship with, that has nothing to do with religion. It's just me and God. And I don't care what religions like that. No, my relationship's personal, and who God says I am as the creator of me and of the heaven and the earth, then that's all I'm concerned with. And once I stood on that foundation, then I started to see Martha for who Martha was always meant to be, before all of the things and before all of the pain and before all of the trauma. And so about 3 years ago, God was like, okay, it's time like for you to start speaking out. And I was like, no, God, I don't speak out. And God had been telling me that I was going to write a book for 10 years. And I was like, God, well, then send me a ghostwriter. And then God was like, but I am your ghostwriter. And I was like, okay. So I wrote my book last year. And it's been out for a year. And that was the beginning of like that confidence of, okay, God, I see you. I do you. Okay. And then I started speaking, and I started coming in contact with person after person after person after person that said, I wasn't in a cult, but I totally relate to that. My dad was a narcissist. Or I wasn't in a cult, but I totally understand sexual deviance and immorality and the way that you were treated as property, right? So you didn't have to be in a cult to understand my story and to understand my trauma and to understand my pain. And they didn't need that either, right? They just needed to understand that pain was pain. Trauma is trauma. And our nervous system acts the same way, whether we had our trauma in a cult or if our parents went through a divorce, right? Like, our nervous system doesn't know the difference. And so understanding that, okay, so then that's when I went and got my coaching certifications, and I started doing trauma-informed work, because I was like, I got to be able to give this back, because there's too many people out there that the doctors are just giving pills to because they have anxiety and they have depression and they have migraines and they have all of these things, PTSD, complex PTSD, because of their trauma, because it just hasn't been dealt with. And that was where this started, of like, okay, now I got to give back. It's time for me to bring my community, to help people to see themselves, to help my battle angels to take their next step in their healing journey, whatever that next step is. And that's where I'm at now. And that's what I'm doing now. And so this is just an opportunity to be able to share on a platform like this, allows other people to see, okay, I recognize that, and maybe I'm ready to take my next step.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I love that you just said battle angels. Is that the word you used for survivor instead of survivor?
Yeah.
I love that. That's so cool.
For me, battle angels are just badasses that got dealt a bad hand and then are like, no, but I'm taking my life back. Like, I'm not going to stay in that survivor mode, because a lot of survivors just survive. And then what? So my book was called Cult Survivor to Courageous Warrior. It was Glory going all the way in, Cult Survivor to Courageous Warrior. And so there was this whole like time where I was like, okay, like survivor to warrior. And then I was like, no, that just doesn't fit me. I need something that fits me. And so when I created my community, Trauma X, is I call them battle angels, because I'm a battle angel. I've went through the fire, but I'm soaring now because I've done the work.
I have struggled with the word survivor. It doesn't settle well with me, even though I know that I am. And I would get so mad because when I would say that I was a victim of a brutal hate crime, like someone tried to murder me, and someone would say, no, you were not a victim, you're a survivor. No, when I was being assaulted, I was a victim, and don't take that away from me. Like, I would get so offended by it. And so I cannot find a word that I like or a phrase that I like. And Jenny and I started talking at the same time. I was about to be like, wait, what did you just call us? Because I love it. So, and I'm going to share.
You can use my term any day.
Yeah, well, you'll get
all a battle angel, David.
Yes, you'll get all the credit. I have like all these tattoos on my arm that represents my recovery, and that might be one day. I have spoken with so many people, and I know myself that even though I was not in a religious trauma, I'm a gay man in the South. So when it comes to religion, me being a gay man, there are preachers on YouTube right now and TikTok right now saying that we should be executed, to their congregation. So I struggle with religion, and I would like to know how you went from the place that you were with, because I hear you correctly that it was based on religion, right? This cult. Yeah. To having the relationship that you have with God now. Was there a time that you were like middle fingering him? Like, what, like.
So David, that's a great question. And I think it's a really important one, because so often when people leave cults, they do one of two things. They either are like, F God, I'm never going back, and become just God haters or whatever. Or there's people that take what God was in that, and that becomes like their foundational, and they never sway from it, right? Like and then there's us in betweeners. So when I left, I was like, I am mad at God. I don't want anything to do with God, because if that's God, I don't want anything to do with it. Because why would I love something that allowed that kind of stuff to happen to me in his name? Like, why would I want a relationship with that? Right. So I did it on my own for a lot of years and was like, I don't do God. Me and God don't like God, whatever. Right. Then there came a time when the unraveling started, and literally I came to a place where I'm like so alone. I'm surrounded by people. I have a husband, I have family, but I am so alone, because nobody understands this pain inside of me that I can't yet communicate, that I can't yet verbalize, because it's so deep. It's in a guttural place, because it's so fibrously intertwined in my very being. But God touched me in that place. And that came from a place of, I was angry at my husband. He had threatened me if I left again, that like, because I would run. Anytime that somebody was angry with me, I ran, because that was my fight or flight. It was my go-to. I didn't know how to sit and talk it out. I didn't have those tools, y'all. I had no tools.
Yeah.
So he threatened me and was like, if you get in your car and leave, like, I can't keep doing this with you. I'm not yelling. I want to have a conversation. Right. So we got in this fight, and I'm like, well, he didn't say I couldn't run. So I went running, and I literally ended up in the front door of this church a mile or so away from our house. I had never been to church. I had never been inside of a church. And I literally just ran and ended up in the front of this church. And that's where God met me, in my tears, in my hurt, in my pain, sitting on this bench after the church is closed. Like, it was just the front door of the church and this bench. And I just sat there, and that's when I surrendered. And I was like, God, I can't do this. I don't know where you are. I don't know how I'm going to get through this, but I can't do whatever this is. It's not working. And that's when God met me. And God met me through the sign. And the sign said, reaching people and building lives. Do you know God loves you? And I was like, if you love me, then you got to show me, and you got to show up, because I don't know love. And I'm pushing away the only man that's ever loved me, which is my husband. And so that was the start of this rebuilding of this personal connection with God. And I did go to that church. I ended up sneaking out of my house for like 3 months every Sunday to go to church. My husband was Muslim, so I would sneak out and go to church, and it was starting to change something inside of me. And my husband recognized it, and he's like, I don't know what you've been doing, but you should keep doing it. I was like, I went to church. And he was like, what? Anyway, it just became like this thing. He was like, well, please keep going because it's working.
I was going to say, he can't retract it now because he's already gave you permission to go do it. So.
And he was fine with it. I was only sneaking out because I thought he would be upset, right? He wasn't upset at all. Anyway, but that started my relationship. And then as I got on my healing journey and started being introduced to other frames of reference when it came to God or the universe or energy or Reiki. I'm a Reiki master because I'm also a therapeutic massage therapist. And so as I was introduced to these other things and all went back to the divine, I was like, oh, okay, this is all connected. And man just messed it up by adding religion.
Absolutely.
Just,
it's so true. I say that all the time. It's so true.
Let's just be really, really honest.
Yeah.
The God that I love and serve, that is merciful and kind and loving and all the things, has nothing to do with religion.
Yeah.
Nothing. Right? Yeah. All the rules and regulations. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, I understand. And people are going to fight with me about that. This is me, guys. And there are plenty of religions out there that are doing positive things in the world. But my relationship is personal.
This is such a good conversation, y'all. I love it. This is so good. So since you had a lot of this trauma in your childhood, we talk about the inner child a lot with just healing process and everything like that. Is there anything that if you could go back and look your inner self child in the face and say something to her, what would it be? I know it's a loaded question.
No, in my healing journey, I kept a whole journal to my 9-year-old self. And that was some of the deepest, most healing work that I have done on this journey. And what I would tell her now is that she's far stronger than she thinks that she is right now. And that she has no idea what's ahead. But just keep your head down and know that you are going to become all that you're meant to be, and that none of these things are going to break you. You are not broken. You are not defiled. You are not any of the labels that are going to be pinned against you, and that you're going to come out a battle angel. And that's what's amazing. And just keep going.
Oh, I love that. So awesome.
Same. And so my big T happened 10 years ago. So, it's still fairly recent. And one thing that I appreciate you saying to your inner child is acknowledging the strength that she already has. Because what I would get so pissed off and offended about is people would be like, this has made you so much stronger. And I'm like, no. I was already strong. That's why I'm still here. Mm-hmm. So don't minimize what I was before this.
No,
so
I
love your answer.
I say that all the time, is that God gives us everything that we're ever going to need at birth. We just have to tap into it. We have to reclaim it. We have to rediscover it, because all of the trauma and all of the things just suppress it, but it's already inside of us, and we just have to rediscover it, reclaim it, re-identify with it, tap into it, whatever your word is. So that strength was already inside of me. That strength was already inside of you. And you just had to claim it, and you had to use it to stay alive in that moment, right? Which you did. So no, all this, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I'm like, bitch, I'm already. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? No.
I know people mean well with the toxic positivity stuff,
Right.
and they don't realize it, but I'm just like, no, quit taking things away from me.
Yeah.
I had very few things left remaining in me in those moments, and don't take those away from me. Do not minimize those. So, okay, I have a fun question that I love to ask. I asked Jenny this when I interviewed her when we first connected. You did not go into detail on like what your hair and clothes and things like that looked like during this cold experience. So you're more than welcome to hit on that, or this might not even have anything to do with it. But I love to hear what people do for themselves, even like their outer appearance that first time. Like, was it a new dress or a different kind of shoes? Like, what was that first treat that you gave yourself to change your look?
Yeah. So we were only allowed to wear button-down blouses and skirts as women, and we weren't allowed to cut our hair. So our hair was always wound up in a bun in the back of our head. No makeup, no jewelry. So the first thing that I did the morning after I got to the safe house in the middle of the night, and then the next morning I went and bought my first pair of pants because it was the middle of winter. And so I went and bought pants. That was the first thing that I did. And it was jeans. And I remember like feeling so weird because my thighs weren't rubbing together, because when you wear a skirt all the time, you always are chafed when you're a big girl. And so my like thighs weren't rubbing together. And I was like, this pant thing is cool. Like my thighs don't rub together.
I love that.
I love it. I love it.
Do you wear skirts now, or are you anti-skirt?
So it took me probably 15 years to put on a skirt. Yeah. I don't wear them a lot, but I do like a little sundress now and then, because now I've released a lot of excess weight. And so I'm actually proud of my body, and I work really hard to be healthy and to be confident. And so I'll wear a sundress, a short sundress or things like that. I'm still fairly modest. Just I've decided that's who I am. Like, that's the skin I'm most comfortable in. And I'm almost 50 years old. So like there's my days of like wearing scant. It's just not gonna happen in life. I'll have to wait till another life to do that. But yeah, I'll wear a dress every now and then, but they're usually pretty modest.
I love that. Well, that's why we have Halloween, right? So that way when we get older, we can go do the risque things on that one day. And it's because it's Halloween.
I'm gonna consider that this upcoming Halloween there, David.
Oh,
yes.
Well, so much for letting me be a part of this. I've really enjoyed it.
Well, thanks for coming on with us, David. And Martha, you are just a gem, a lovely human being. And I'm so glad we met. And I feel like we're just going to like continue this relationship. I feel like there's other things maybe that we can get involved in together. And before we end this, though, I would love for you to tell our listeners and our viewers, where can they find you on social media or website? Otherwise, all the things.
Yeah, so you can find me on all social media under my name, Martha Glory Kartaui, Kartaoui. My community is trauma-x.org, and that's my Battle Angel community. So would love for you to go and look at that, and you can join for free, or you can do one of the paid memberships, which comes with packages and things like that. Or you can watch my TV show, which is Let Glory Shine, every Thursday at 7:00 on Prospera TV, which is on YouTube and Roku. So very excited about that. And I'm always looking for guests. So Jenny and David, I would love for you guys to come on my show.
Oh my gosh, that would be amazing.
Love that. Yeah. And at the end of the day, I just want people to feel less alone that have been through any kind of trauma. And I'm just trying to make the world a better place with each person that I meet. And so I just want to honor both of you and say thank you so much for creating this safe, sacred space, because I went way more deep than I've ever gone on a podcast. So thank you for that sacred space. And I think it's just because when you know that others have done and felt what you have, it's safe. So thank you, Jenny. I would love to hear your story at some point as well. And David, thank you for sharing everything that you did today as well. You were obviously the one that was supposed to be here. So thank you. I don't think there's no mistakes. That's the way I look at things, is there's no mistakes. And so I just honor both of you and say thank you.
Aw, well, we so appreciate you and thank you for coming on today. Wait. Before you stop listening, I just have one thing to say. This is the boring part, guys. It's the legal jargon. Just wanted to make a disclaimer that anything you hear in this episode is all alleged. As you know, everyone is innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Although we do believe victims and we support survivors and believe their stories, we do have to be careful with accusing people. Thank you so much for listening.